On the evening of the 12th of October 1979, Amanda Zolis was last seen waiting to catch a bus at a Tudor Street Hamilton bus stop in order to meet friends at a Christian coffee shop in the civic area of Newcastle. She never arrived, and it is not known if she got on the bus. That was 45 years ago. This will be the first of two videos where I will cover the circumstances of her disappearance, the police investigations at the time and later on, almost 20 years later, the information suggesting that she may have gone to Queensland, several possible sightings of her after she disappeared, the reasons that she may have chosen to disappear or possibly been the victim of foul play, including death threats from those involved in the local drug scene, and doubts over whether police ever really totally and absolutely closed her case. I'll actually begin by discussing the disappearance of Amanda from the point where I ended my videos about the disappearances of Anni, Tominac and Joy Hodgins. So I did that one probably about, well, it was a July disappearance, so yeah, about 2 months ago. You may recall that all three of the cases, so Amanda, Anni and Joy's, were closed in 1998 by the police as they considered that their disappearances were not under suspicious circumstances and that they were all runaways. But as I explained in that video, I had very serious doubts that that was the case, especially since in August last year, which was 2023, so 25 years later, you might as well say, as part of questions and answers in the Legislative Council of the New South Wales Government, all three of them were included in a list of over, I think it was about 60, unsolved missing persons and murder cases from the north coast of New South Wales. So it seems that they are still considered missing. And just to check, I did go to the New South Wales Police Missing Persons Register, which does list Amanda Zolis as well as Anni Tominac, I should say, as missing persons. As I said, this clearly was very confusing and it raised a number of questions as to whether those cases were ever really and truly and completely closed. Or perhaps they were reopened for some reason, but yeah. I also mentioned in that video that I might send an email to the Member of Parliament who raised that question to see if he could possibly clarify some of that confusion. And I did send him an email, and at this stage I have not had a reply, but I have spoken to his advisor on the phone who said he'll look into it and get back to me when he basically gets to do that. So hopefully I'll have more to say on that in a future video. But in the meantime, if you want more details about what I spoke about in that video of Anni Tominac and Joy Hodgins, I'll put a note of the time in that video and a link to it. But getting back to Amanda Zolis' story, the Newcastle Herald provided the following description of Amanda on the 6th of August in 2007. She was 16, born on March 3, 1963, so that definitely would have made her 16 when she disappeared, and described as 163 centimetres tall, of solid build, with light brown hair, grey eyes, and fair skin. The earliest newspaper report I found that mentions her disappearance was just over a year after she disappeared, and that was in the Newcastle Herald on the 11th of November 1980. And it also has further details in relation to Robin Hickey and Amanda Robinson, which I intend to discuss in a future video. Parents believe missing girls are still alive. John and Cecily Zolis, Amanda Zolis's parents, believe their daughter is still alive. We haven't heard from her since she went missing on October 12, but we feel she is alive, Mr. Zolis said. Now, as that quote just says October 12 and doesn't say last year or anything similar, I suspect that that quote may be from an earlier interview and could be from an article that I just haven't found yet. But it goes on, Amanda left home about 7 p.m. that night to go to a coffee house. She rang about 10:15 p.m. and told me she was going to Queensland. When I asked her who she was going with, she started crying and said she needed her clothes. I again asked who she was going with, and the phone went dead. That's the last we heard of her. Now, from Amanda's father's description, it sounds as if she was under some duress for some reason. And it then would have been quite disturbing for him for her call to be suddenly cut off. Now, if she was going to Queensland, it clearly wasn't pre-planned, and there does seem to be an implication that someone else was involved in making that phone call. But sadly, her father never heard from her again or got any answers as to what happened to her, as he died in 1987, so about 8 years later. Also, I have noticed that Amanda's sister passed away only a few months ago, still without the knowledge of what happened to Amanda. Future David here. I have done further research into Amanda's family, and it seems she may have no further living immediate family members. Trina, who died in June this year, 2024, was Amanda's half-sister from their mother's previous marriage. Amanda also had a second half-sister from that previous marriage, Toni, who died in 2018. Their mother, Cecily, died in 2016. Amanda's father, John Zolis, was also previously married, but under a different name, that being Zoltan Ladislaus Nagy-Vianyi. I may have pronounced that incorrectly and assume he probably changed it to make it easier to deal with the highly Anglo-Australian society that existed in the 1950s. I was not able to find any record of any children from his first marriage. In any case, even as it appears that Amanda has no other living immediate family members, I'm sure her friends and extended family members, such as cousins, nieces, or nephews, would like this mystery solved, even if it is just to confirm whether she met with foul play or did go away and create a new life. Then it would give them some form of closure. But I'll leave it there and let you get back to the main video. Moving on the 9th of January 1998, the Newcastle Herald gave more information about the circumstances leading up to her disappearance. Where are they now? Amanda Zolis. Police do not know whether Amanda Zolis boarded the bus she planned to catch to Civic on the night she disappeared. A neighbour was the last person to see the 16-year-old at 6:30 p.m. on October 12, 1979. He had walked her to the bus stop and chatted with her about her plans for the evening. She had planned to meet friends at a Christian coffee shop near Civic, but never arrived. Ms. Zolis had kissed her mother goodbye and headed for a bus stop in Tudor Street, Hamilton. Her parents received a telephone call from her several months later. Now, I think that's incorrect. There were a couple of earlier newspaper reports I saw that did seem to get confused between whether she disappeared and made the phone call in October or December. But from her father's accounts and all but a couple of other newspaper reports, the phone call was made on the evening of her disappearance, which was on the 12th of October 1979. So, unless there was another phone call in December that was something else that we do not know about, I think it's unlikely that there was a call in December. Goes on, she said she wanted to go to Queensland. When her father John asked her who she was going with, the call ended abruptly. The call was made from a public telephone box, and it says in December 1979, but obviously October. At the time of her disappearance, Ms. Zolis had been receiving threats. So, her disappearance could be explained by the threats being carried out, so foul play, but alternatively, she could have decided to leave to escape those threats. But before I discuss the threats in more detail, it would seem likely that the police would have at least wanted to get a statement from the neighbour who walked her to the bus stop. But did they? You can probably already guess. The answer to that lies in another article on the same page of the Newcastle Herald. This article also gives her mother's perspective on the threats against Amanda and the police investigations. Families still hoping for answers on girls. Police had also assumed that Ms. Zolis was a runaway. Her mother, Mrs. Cecily Fanshawe, now I have checked a number of sources that consider the surname is actually pronounced Fanshawe, despite the rather long and different looking spelling. But if anyone knows different to what I've said, put it in the comments. So her mother said Ms. Zolis had received threats before she died. I think that should actually say disappeared because her death was never actually confirmed. But they were not investigated. She was told she would end up in a pine box, she said. Amanda was very scared because she was threatened. She was very frightened. So would she have been frightened enough to run away or disappear, go into hiding? Maybe. But you would think, since 45 years have now passed, she would have made some form of contact with her family or police or someone by now, especially since you would think those threats would no longer be likely to exist. They may, but I would not think so. It also had taken police almost 20 years to interview a neighbour who walked Ms. Zolis to a bus stop on the night she disappeared. So he wasn't interviewed at the time. The police never asked, they never checked, Mrs. Fanshawe said. We were doing all the chasing while they were saying she will come back one day. Yeah, 45 years and that hasn't happened. Ms. Zolis went missing while she was on her way to a Christian coffee shop in Newcastle on October 12, 1979. The police are interviewing people now that they should have interviewed 20 years ago, Mrs. Fanshawe said. They never interviewed her friends. I feel I was neglected and it makes me very angry and bitter. The admission by the police commissioner, Mr. Ryan, that mistakes might have been made when the cases were first investigated had not gone far enough. I thought, good on you, mate. I've known this for 20 years, Mrs. Fanshawe said. So, it seems at the time of Amanda's disappearance, the police investigations were pretty much non-existent, even though her mother says Amanda had had death threats. So clearly they didn't take them very seriously. And what were the reasons for these death threats? The Daily Telegraph reported on the 8th of January 1998 that Mandy had been running with a wild crowd and was involved in drugs, Ms. Zolis said. I assume they're talking about her mother saying this. Only weeks before she disappeared, an adult involved in the drugs scene told her she would end up in a pine box. Her father had provided information to police about people growing drugs, and Mandy was threatened as a result of that. The police just said, "You're not in America." From the start, we believe she met with foul play, but the police just didn't seem interested. So they pretty much seem to have downplayed it totally. And we have a much more detailed account that was given on the 20th of March in 1998 that was in the Newcastle Herald. Amanda Zolis knew too much, mother. Missing hunter teenager Amanda Zolis was killed because she knew too much, according to her mother. Amanda was last seen on October 12, 1979, heading off to a coffee shop near the Civic. Amanda's mother, Mrs. Cecily Fanshawe, said her daughter had been killed by crime lords. Mrs. Fanshawe said Amanda became caught up in the Newcastle drug trade and she was silenced. She asserts that the 16-year-old turned police informant in the weeks before her disappearance. She told me she gave names and they, the drug traders, knew she knew too much, she said. Now, the Daily Telegraph article that I read before that said it was her father that gave the names to police. But this article says it was Amanda. And that does seem like it'd be more likely they directly threaten whoever may have been reporting to the police. So it may have been both of them that were doing it. I don't know, but yes. But apart from the two articles disagreeing on that point, they seem to have agreed on everything else. And in any case, it was Amanda who was being threatened. My daughter was threatened. It was a different case to the others, meaning the other 4 who disappeared at the time. Police investigating the disappearance of 4 young women refused to comment on the matter. Well, that's right. At that time, there was only 2 that were being looked at, I believe. The other 2, Anni, Tominac and Joy Hodgins, were added to the list. May have been just after that or around the same time anyway. A spokeswoman said investigators had declined to comment on any suggested line of inquiry. Now, as an aside, police were willing to publicise some lines of inquiry, especially if they were seeking information from the public. So there's one example that on the 4th of February 1998, as reported in the Newcastle Herald, police call for more public support in Hunter cases, progress on disappearances. Police investigating the disappearances of 4 Hunter people yesterday said they were making progress, but did not elaborate on what that progress was. During a special media conference called by Acting Detective Chief Superintendent of New South Wales Crime Agencies, Rod Lynch, an appeal was made for public help in solving the cases of Gordana Katevsky, 16, Graham Monk, 23, Amanda Zolis, 16, and Leanne Goodall, 20. So they were the actual 4 cases referred to before. But anyway. So during the 12-minute conference, Superintendent Lynch fielded questions from about 15 reporters, but refused to disclose specifics. In regards to Amanda, that was reported in this article, inquiries have established that she had a keen interest in CB radios and was a member of the High Rollers CB Radio Club, which operated in the Newcastle area. Anyone who was in the club during the late 1970s is asked to contact police. Now, from my memory of CB radio is that it was like the social media of the late 1970s and was very popular among people in their teens and early 20s. It would be interesting to know if police found out anything from that line of inquiry as I imagine she would have heard some questionable conversations, as you did now and then, occurring on the CB radio. But most were probably very loosely coded, or not, because some people weren't too bright. But anyway, going back to the 20th of March 1998 Newcastle Herald article, and I'll skip through a few paragraphs. Amanda's mother says, "Mandy's disappearance is not related to the other girls," she said. "The fact they went missing around the same time is just a coincidence. Mandy was receiving threats in the weeks leading up to her disappearance." In December 1979, so as I said before, it's not December, it's October. Or that's my assumption, that it's just an error that keeps getting repeated. But probably an idea just to make a note of that, just in case it's of some relevance and might be important to something find out later. But anyway, so back in actually October 79, Amanda telephoned her father to say she was going to Queensland and was unsure when she would return. So I haven't seen that bit about her saying she'd return, but Anyway, she was with another person at the time and the telephone call was cut off. So, yeah, so it does seem there is a belief that there was someone with her when she made that phone call. It is obvious to us that she was mixed up in something that was too much for her, Mrs. Fanshawe said. "I am happy that something is being done, but I would be shocked if they found my daughter in this area. Her case is a whole different story." Now, if what Amanda's mother is reported as saying is true, then it would not be surprising if those threats were actually carried out, or that she would deliberately disappear and go into hiding to escape those threats, and possibly in the hope that it'd blow over and return later. I think it would be even more likely to be worried about those threats if police actually did take action against those people who it's claimed she or her father named. And it would be interesting to know who those people were and if police did take some action. Because you'd think, well, they could be suspects in her disappearance. But I'll leave it there for this video, and in the second of the two videos about Amanda Zolis's disappearance, my discussion will cover whether she chose to disappear, and if so, did she go to Queensland? And I'll also discuss reports of a couple of possible sightings of Amanda in the years after she disappeared. So, to be notified when I upload this next video, or any future videos I upload, please subscribe and click on the bell to be notified when I do so. I hope you found this video interesting and informative, and if you'd like to support me to make more, you can do so at Patreon. I'm David A. Elliott. Have a good one and see you around like a ristle.